Recording. All right. So this is Money and Power. The source sheet is was put together by Rabbi Avi Strasberg. Um, yeah, so here we go. All of the time we are confronted by the reality that sometimes the people we hold up as great leaders, people who are brilliant artists, effective politicians, and generous philanthropists, who have given much to society and have much more to offer, can also be deeply flawed individuals. What do we do when we find out that one of these people has crossed an ethical red line? What happens to their leadership and how do we respond? In this session, we're going to look at two different stories from the Talmud that examine this question. Can you remember the Torah and forget the deeds? Or in other words, can you separate the artist from the art? When we find out about a person's moral wrongdoing, can we continue to benefit from this person's Torah? And here I mean Torah in the most expansive sense of the word. Or do we lose the Torah along with the leader? What criteria do we use to access this question? And is the answer to this question different depending on the field of the leader's expertise? Do we answer differently for artists and scientists than we do for rabbis and teachers? Okay, so here are the questions it says to keep in mind while we read this story. And then we'll come back and answer them, but to just like have your mind oriented toward this while you listen. So how do the rabbis handle a case of a corrupt leader? And what are the competing values? So here's the story. This is from the Talmud, from Tractate Moed Katan. There was a certain Torah scholar who gained a bad reputation due to rumors about his conduct. Rav Yehuda said, "What should be done? To excommunicate him is not an option. The sages need him as he is a great Torah authority. To not excommunicate him is also not an option, as then the name of heaven would be desecrated." Rav Yehuda said to Rabba Bar Hana, "Have you heard anything with regard to this issue?" Rabba Bar Hana replied, "Rabbi Yochanan said as follows, 'What is the meaning of that which is written? For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek Torah at his mouth, for he is a messenger of the Lord of hosts.'" That's a quote from the prophet Malachi. Rabba Bar Hana expounds, this verse teaches if the teacher is similar to an angel, the word for messenger and angel are the same in Hebrew. If the teacher is similar to an angel of the Lord, then seek Torah from his mouth. But if he is not pure and upright, then do not seek Torah from his mouth. Even if he is knowledgeable about Torah, do not learn from him. Based on this statement, Rabbi Yehuda ostracized that Torah scholar. And then a wasp came and stung the ostracized scholar on his amah, which is forearm, and then he died from the wasp sting. So that's the story.
Wasps will do that to you.
Yeah, I guess if you're allergic, I don't know. Okay. So how do the rabbis handle the case of a corrupt leader? No?
They rooted him out.
They did. They booted him out. And what were the competing values?
Sounds like our contemporary Congress.
I was thinking the exact same thing, especially 21 Republicans in the House.
Yeah, who want to shut it down.
Yeah.
Well, so it doesn't tell us what the rumors were about the scholar. So that, that could, I guess, affect our read of the situation. But I feel like a lot of the time when we're talking about this concept of like, is he upright and pure? You know, does he act in the way of Torah, or does he only speak in the way of Torah? So we're really looking at like hypocrisy, right? We want leaders who will walk the walk and not just talk the talk, right? I think is like what we're getting at here. So Rob Avi Strasberg continues on her story from the Talmud. When we begin the story, it's unclear exactly what the young scholar has done wrong and if he has even done anything wrong at all. It's because it says he gained a bad reputation due to rumors. So who knows? What we know is that many rumors are circulating about his bad behavior, and by the end of the story, we are told that after spending a lifetime in excommunication, many years in which he would not be able to take part in prayer life and no one could learn from his teachings, he was eventually stung by a wasp and died. Later, rabbinic commentators understood this to mean, okay, so this is a footnote that I didn't share because I am easily embarrassed, but Amah means the forearm, and it is often in the Torah used as, or the Talmud used as a measurement, right? Like a foot is so an Amah is a measurement. But the footnote says, sometimes in the Talmud, it is also euphemistically used to refer to a penis. So apparently the
A
later
foot-long penis?
well, yeah.
Okay.
So apparently the later rabbinic commentators understand this story as the fact that the wasp stings him on the Amah is proof that the rumors about his, we're to understand, sexual misconduct were true. And that's why the wasp came and stung him on the penis. And he died. So in real
Ryan,
life,
before you get further into it, one of the
yeah,
things that's crossing my mind is if we're talking about rumors, aren't you supposed to not gossip and talk about untruths? So how are rumors enough to oust somebody from the community and from doing his job and everything?
that is a good question. I suppose so. The rabbis say, I don't remember if this is in the Talmud or if this is medieval, but there's a teaching that rumors hurt three people, right? They are harmful to the person that the rumor is about, obviously. But they are also like spiritually harmful to the person who speaks them and the person who hears them. But the person who hears them may not be actively participating, right? Like you can't always help what you hear. So let's say that there are these rumors going around in the community, and the rabbis can want to squash the rumors and say, like, you shouldn't be gossiping. Let's shut it down. But if it's already out there and the reputation is already harmed, that still will reflect badly on their study house or on the community or on the institution or whatever. So then they still have to decide how to respond. And I think, like, to some degree, not to diminish like the Me Too movement down to rumors, but there is still that question of like he said, she said, and like how do we judge people for things that didn't really have anything to do with us, but they will affect the community and they affect other people who have experienced similar things if we don't take a stance, and it makes them feel unsafe in our community. And, like, I think the issues are still relevant, even when they are unsubstantiated, potentially.
Okay. And I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was a
So
good
take it-
question. Now I just have to go back to my train of thought. So I was gonna say, so in this story, obviously, like, the ending, and especially the later rabbinic understanding of the ending, like, it ties everything up in a neat little bow, right? The justice was served. The rumors were validated, whatever, by his demise. In real life, like, that doesn't happen. We might never know really what a corrupt politician did or didn't do, what the extent of the damage was. You might have to make a decision about ousting someone from a position of power or from a community or whatever, but never really know if that was the right thing to do, or you might choose to not do that and never really know if that's the right thing to do. And in real life, it's way messier, right, than in this story. So how do we make those decisions? That's a real question first, and then we'll go back and look at how the rabbis.
A trial.
A trial. Okay.
But even if you have a trial, what is your standard of proof? Is it like a criminal trial where it's beyond a
Yeah.
reasonable doubt, or is it clear and convincing evidence, or even less than that, just a preponderance of the evidence? And that would be my first thought.
Yeah.
Were these rumors, does the document say anything about the nature of the rumor? Was it sexual?
Well, so the source itself in the Talmud Bavli Moed Katan, it does not say, but the later rabbinic commentaries say that the fact that he was stung on his amah is meant to be understood as evidence that the rumors were of a sexual nature, or the rumors
Right.
of his misconduct were of a sexual nature.
It struck at his
But we don't
manhood.
know for sure. What?
It struck at his manhood.
Yes,
The beat.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in Rav Yehuda's position, let's say he hears the rumors. He does not know for certain whether they are true or not. He does know that the rumors are damaging this scholar's reputation, and people don't want to come learn from him anymore. And now that's going to reflect poorly on their whole community. However big that, I don't know if that means like all rabbis, all Jews, this particular study house, like whatever, but he's worried about how it reflects on anyone he's like in charge of, right? So what is at stake for him in the moment? How does he weigh his options here?
Well, he perceives the community as the victim, and so he's looking to protect the community, protect the victim. So I would imagine that immediately the first thing that would come to mind is stop any further damage from happening. And how does he do that? He ousts them so that he can't be associated with that particular community anymore.
Remember the
But
rabbi
does
in
it have to go
DC?
further than that?
Remember the rabbi in DC who they caught viewing women as they were getting undressed for the mikveh?
Yeah.
I can't remember what happened to him.
I think he went to prison.
Yeah, he went to jail.
So that would certainly be a way to protect people.
Right.
Yeah, but we don't know here what was done that was, what the wrong thing was. We don't know if it was
Yeah.
a crime, if it was just a moral thing, and being ostracized from the community is a pretty potent punishment, especially when you don't really know what the infraction was.
Yeah.
I think also one thing when we're talking about the Talmud, Jews had some amount of autonomy over their own community, but they didn't really have institutional power. They couldn't imprison people. And when we think about like our communities now, like a synagogue community or a, Jewish institution, we may or may not have that ability too. Like there could be infractions that would be criminal and we'd have to get the civil authorities involved. But there also are likely to be things that are internal. And so I don't know, this question could be really broad. So as we expand out beyond Rabbi Avi Straussberg's source sheet in the coming weeks, we can talk about those things separately, because that changes the conversation. If we're talking about like impeaching the president versus replacing your rabbi, or kicking someone out of the minyan because his former partner accused him of assault, or like those are all very different situations
Well,
that can all sort of be read out from what we're looking at here in this story.
but then there are other things that I consider merit some kind of punishment, not jail necessarily, but for example, my feelings about the Orthodox are exemplified by my daughter-in-law's niece. Her sister is Orthodox, became Orthodox, and she had a bat mitzvah. But I couldn't believe that they let a woman read from the Torah, and as it turned out, they did not. She was only allowed to have a party and call that her bat mitzvah.
Wow.
I consider that despicable. but
Absolutely.
I do, in terms of whether that would merit any legal action, I guess not. Although I consider that discrimination, but
that's an internal communal, like that family buys into that system. So
that's true.
it's different than like civil discrimination. And it wouldn't really be punishable in any means, because you don't like that, you can leave that
You
community.
can leave, yeah.
But it's different when somebody violates the community norm. Then how does the community respond? And that's the thing, like about communities and about even pluralism. You still have to have some boundaries. You have to know what your values are, and like how much you can stretch them or stretch your boundaries to be welcoming and inclusive and make space for everyone. But you can't really make space for everyone, because whatever your boundaries are might violate somebody else's. And like egalitarianism is really important to us. That means an Orthodox person would never feel comfortable in our synagogue.
True.
And like that's okay with me.
Yeah, me too.
But like we have to be honest about that, so yeah, so I think that's more. And then so violating community norms and boundaries, and then what that looks like, especially for someone in a position of power, whether that's leadership, or in the case of a synagogue community, I don't feel like we have this problem at Ner Shalom, thankfully, but you often see in synagogue politics where like the donor with the most money, ends up getting to pull strings. Like, that's not really right either. And like, what do you do when that person is accused of something like domestic abuse or whatever? And but like, we need a new Torah, so we can't ostracize him or whatever.
Well,
Like,
that was the thing though, what the Orthodox in New York had a thing for some years, I don't know about now, had a thing going with the police. And the police would look the other way on domestic violence cases and let them handle it in their community, which meant no punishment, usually.
yes, there are issues.
And
There are
that,
definitely issues with the Orthodox communities and civil authorities and where that bleeds over. In New York, in I see it in Brooklyn with the stuff with the police. The Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn have the Shomrim, which is like their own internal police force, and so the NYPD just like stays out of Borough Park.
that's outrageous.
And then in places like Muncie or New City, you know, right outside the city where there's a big Jewish population, or what is it, Lake Ridge? I don't know, one of the lake something in New Jersey where there's big Orthodox populations. Then they have issues of the Orthodox community taking over like the school boards and stuff.
I mean, there's another issue here that is discrimination. What if they can prevent their daughters from getting an education?
Right. And there was that big scandal, I don't know, 2-3 years ago now, of like that this wasn't as much an issue of discrimination between genders, but in general, that the yeshivas were not teaching, like they're supposed to legally have some level of civil secular education. And it turned out that like the 8th graders couldn't do 3rd grade math and like things like that, or they were at a 3rd grade level on math and English. And so
that's a leadership issue, and it's a community issue, and it's
yes, it's several things. But and then who's in charge, right? So that's a violation of like the community norms of the United States, right?
Yes.
Like we have a certain bar that like the Department of Education has set that we're supposed to have, that like probably, I don't really know the history of it, but I'm gonna guess was developed after like the establishment of child labor laws and the institution of everybody has to go to school up until a certain age and things like that. And so like that's about like creating equal access for all people despite racial and economic backgrounds. And it's about you know, the well-being of the whole community, that everyone has access to education. So these specific communities violating that, but it's for their like religious values. And so then it's a discrimination for the state to come in and say, no, you can't teach what's important to you. You have to teach what we say you have to teach. So it is tricky.
Rabbi, I think it becomes an issue when they accept state money for their schools.
Oh, definitely.
And don't go ahead and abide by the state guidelines for secular education. But I believe if the Orthodox community wants to run their own schools and do their own thing and not take state money, they can do what they want.
Right.
Well, but then look at Ohio, where kids were being abused. What was it?
The college?
Was it?
In the university?
No, this was childcare.
Oh, wait, I didn't hear about this.
I wish I still had
I don't remember if I did.
Okay. I don't remember all the details, but I was shocked that I hadn't heard they were doing anything about it, but it looked like they were going to close it down. So that was good, but you know. Anyway, sorry. Sorry to take so much time.
Okay.
I consider them so exemplary of the problems with leadership. And
could I return to the issue of God? And and the bee, and punishing a man in the penis.
Uh-huh.
Is there geez, allegorical or whatever
Yeah, any
connection
other
with
thing?
this that that God would
Okay.
intervene?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the point here is that so the story itself, right, is very vague. We don't know what the rumors are, we don't know if they're true, and we don't know for certain that he was stung on the penis because an ama could mean a forearm or it could mean euphemistically the penis. So we don't know for
Well,
sure. But the fact that the rabbis interpret it that way is meant to communicate to us that yes, it was divine punishment. It was proof that he was guilty of the rumors, and it was proof that the rumors that he was guilty of were of a sexual nature. Um, and that's why it happened. That's why he died, and it validated Rav Yehuda excommunicating him.
could I ask you
If
a
he didn't
question?
have that ending, what would we know?
Yeah. I'd like to ask a question before in prefacing a comment. Is sexuality, punishment, and sexuality big in Judaism?
Is punishment and sexuality big in
No,
Judaism?
not necessarily. Is sexuality, yeah, sexuality referring to sexual situations or organs, whatever. Is that a big concept in Judaism? Let me tell you why I'm asking that question.
Okay.
Because the word testify uh, comes from the fact that in Jewish courts, men held their testicles when raising their right arm. So to swear truth.
Right.
They would hold their testicles and at the same time raise their arm, meaning that their manhood, their sexuality was at stake in telling the truth. So my question to you is, can that concept, that little knowledge that I have, be expanded further to say that in Judaism, sexuality is very important in truth, in honor, in well-being?
Um, yes, I think so. Sexuality is definitely important in Judaism, right? Like, be fruitful and multiply is the first commandment. The rabbis talk a lot about sexual ethics and especially about male genitalia because they're men and that's what they talk about in the Talmud. There are a lot of tangents about body function. Um, um, and I would say I don't know that it's about necessarily sexuality, but about um like the intimacy of it that like um men would hold on to each other's inner thighs when they not on the genitals itself, but like near it when they made oaths to one another that there was like that physical contact that like communicated I trust you to be near this part of my body as we make this oath and um like the rite of circumcision, right? That the thing that sets Jewish men apart historically anyway, most is on that part of the body. And that's the symbol of Jewish men's commitment to God. Um,
Hmm.
so I do think there's something to that, to what you're saying, but I also think in this particular case, it's just about this rabbi's particular crime. And that if that it could also have been said like this is also a thing that might happen in the Talmud and it's like everything has to tie up in a neat little bow not everything. There are plenty of arguments that get left unresolved. But when they do decide that things have to tie up in a neat little bow, it could just as well have been that this rabbi got stung by the wasp on his tongue, and that was evidence that the rumors and his crime were that he spoke slander about someone, or that he, I don't know, whatever, that he had some vicious speech. So it's just about the crime and the punishment in this case. Okay, we're gonna move on to another story that also surprisingly doesn't quite deal with the subject of money, but eventually we are going to get to how money and actual positions of power affect these questions of justice. Okay, so this one is from Hagigah, a different chapter of the Babylonian Talmud. The daughter of Acher, so just a little footnote. Acher is Elisha ben Abuya. He was a rabbi that became a heretic. If you've ever read the novel As a Driven Leaf, it's about him. So this guy. All right. So the daughter of Acher came before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and said to him, "Rabbi, provide me with sustenance." He said to her, "Whose daughter are you?" She said, "I am the daughter of Acher." He said to her, "Is there still of his seed remaining in the world? But isn't it stated, he shall have neither son nor grandson among his people, or any remaining in his dwellings?" And that's a quote from Job that Rabbi Yehuda is bringing. So she said to him, "Remember his Torah, and do not remember his deeds." Immediately, fire descended and licked Rabbi's bench where he was sitting. Rabbi wept and said, if God sends fire to protect the honor of those who treat the Torah with contempt in such a manner, how much more so would God do for those who treat it with honor? So what is this one telling us?
But how did God went against what they had said?
That God cares what they say?
That God went against, like when, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Because they're supposed to have the power.
Right. So there's a few issues, I think, that this story is communicating with us. So one is that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi has power, and this young woman has none. And she comes to him looking for help, and he doesn't even address her question of help, but is like, "How do you even exist?" Which is a pretty rude response to someone saying, "Please feed me." So there's that. Is like, what kind of leadership? And this is the guy, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, is not just any rabbi, right? He is the person who put together the Mishnah, the first part of the Talmud. He did the editing and compiling and ordering. He's a tzaddik, like he is a great rabbi. And yet in this moment, he's not acting with a lot of tzedek. So what does that teach us about human leaders in general? And then the fact that God then sends this fire to burn up where the rabbi is sitting in defense of Acher's Torah, what does that teach us about those who can speak Torah but do not live by it? Right?
You mean like a hypocrite?
Like the hypocrite? Or, like those who can't do teach?
Okay.
Because something interesting about Acher, and I don't know if that's Rabbi Strasberg does not mention it here, so I don't know if she wants us to consider this in this particular story. But something that I really like about his story is that there's a story in the Talmud. First of all, the fact that the Talmud talks about him so much in general is interesting, right? He was this heretic that was excommunicated, and yet he's still in the Talmud. So that's interesting. And there's one story in particular where he is going for a Shabbat walk. Actually, he's on his donkey on Shabbat, which you're not supposed to do, but what does he care? He's a heretic. And walking alongside him is Rabbi Meir, who they had been study partners before Acher left the study house. So they're still walking, they're still friends, and they are having a fine conversation about Shabbat or whatever. And they get to the town line, and Rabbi Meir is so engrossed in their conversation that he's about to continue walking with Elisha ben Abuya. And Elisha ben Abuya says, we're about to cross the line, or we're about to take that extra step that will make you have traveled too far on Shabbat. Like, this is the line for your practice. And I know that this is the law and this is important to you, even though it's not important to me anymore. So I've been paying attention, even though you haven't, because I don't want you to violate something that's important to you. And then he keeps riding his donkey because he doesn't care, but Rabbi Meir turns back and goes home. So there's that sense of he still had Torah. He just didn't want to follow it for himself. So what is that? How does God
like,
understand that?
When we go through the sons that know the difference between right and wrong, and the one doesn't know
Right.
enough not to do wrong and that kind of stuff, or to do right.
Right.
Reminds me of a schlubby doctor who says you got to lose weight.
Sure. Or the hairdresser with scraggly split ends. Yeah.
Or every single Reformed Jew ever.
Hi.
Yeah. And would God strike the benches of the Orthodox who look down on us if they were to, I don't know, slander feels like a strong word because it's not slander if it's true, I'm pretty sure. But
Well, what about the Orthodox that don't consider like Reformed Jews?
well, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. So right, like he Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, like, Acher is a heretic and like his seed should be wiped off from the earth. He's not a real Jew. And his daughter says he still taught Torah. Remember that part. And then the fire comes and burns his bench to, like, I guess it's not super clear again in the story, but the implication here being to prove the daughter's point, to scold Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So if an Orthodox Jew says, Reform Jews aren't Jews and they are the reason the Holocaust happened, or, that sort of thing, which I'm not saying is a prevalent belief, but it is certainly a thing that has been said. Should, like, may God strike their bench on fire? Does that feel like a reasonable response?
No,
No? Okay.
but that's just because I cringe at that kind of thing. But
At God doing that kind of physical violence. Yeah.
But it isn't it a metaphor? I mean, this God didn't really go poof
Right.
and it's a metaphor.
Right.
See, basically, I see it as a metaphor, saying, like, hey, you're saying do as I say, not as I do, kind of deal.
Right.
And
Right.
you
And
think twice about what you say.
right. And Rabbi Yehuda says, if God sends the fire to protect the honor of those who treat Torah with contempt, how much more so would God do for those who treat it with honor? So he's scolded, but he's also strengthened in his own beliefs and remembers to be kind to this young woman who came to ask for help, that like it's not helpful to desecrate her father's memory when she comes asking for food. So you know, it gets the point across.
Not to mention the fact that she's not responsible for what father did.
Right. Right. It's really quite absurd that his response to please help me is, why do you exist? Like what an answer. Um oh, the next text. Oh no, it's not the next text. But okay, so the next text does bring um another story about Elisha ben Abuya and Rabbi Meir together. It's not the one about Shabbat, but another one about how Elisha ben Abuya did continue to teach Torah, or to remind others of Torah that he knew would be important to them, even when he didn't follow it anymore himself. So this one is from it doesn't say, so I'm gonna assume it's also from Chagiga, because otherwise I think there would be a citation. So Rabbi Meir, how could he learn Torah from the mouth of Acher? Didn't Rabbah bar Chana said that Rabbi Yochanan said, what is the meaning of that which is written? For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek Torah from his mouth, for he is an angel of the Lord of hosts. So that was the quote from the first text that we heard. If the rabbi is similar to an angel of the Lord of hosts, they should seek Torah from his mouth. But if not, they should not seek Torah from his mouth. So Rabbi, not Rabbi anymore, Elisha ben Abuya does not act like an angel. So what good is his Torah? Reish Lakish said, Rabbi Meir found a verse and interpreted it. Incline your ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply your heart to my knowledge. It does not state to their knowledge, but to my knowledge, capital M, God's knowledge. The verses contradict each other. So, hold on. So pause before we read their conclusion. How do these contradict each other? So the verse from Prophet Malachi says, only learn Torah from a leader who behaves in the way of Torah. But Proverbs says, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise, apply your heart to God's knowledge. So if there is something to be learned from a leader, even if it's how to not behave, that puts you in the way of the Lord, it's still worth, learning from that leader. Right? So the rabbis say the verses contradict each other. This is not difficult. The case is referring to a gadol. So the Malachi one is talking about a leader specifically, whereas the other case is referring to a katan. So the Proverbs is talking about how you might respond to anyone you see. Which I suppose then the question is, if that's the conclusion, right, is that this one is about a leader and this one is about a fellow community member, which one is Rabbi or I keep saying rabbi, sorry. Which one is Elisha ben Abuya? Because he was a rabbi, he was a leader, and then he became a heretic and wasn't anymore. So does that still set up the expectation that he behave a certain way? Or can he be treated as a regular Joe Schmo? Because we do hold different standards, right? Like there was it NPR or Radio Lab? I heard a story on a podcast some time ago about the right to be erased, right? That it's very hard to get things off the internet once they are on the internet. But you can petition, especially in Europe. I think the laws in the US are not as in favor of this, but you can petition to have like a record erased. But it's not a given. And so then there was a particular example they used of a police officer who forged overtime paperwork. And, when charges were pressed and whatever, and some years later, he wanted that information to not be findable on the internet anymore. And whereas there was precedence of other petty larceny or like in a approximate amount of money being stolen, other crimes of that amount being taken off the internet or being removed from like newspaper websites, records and things like that. The feeling was that as a police officer, he was being held to a different standard, and he didn't just steal from like a corporation, he stole from taxpayers. And so that newspaper declined his request. They would not take the information off their website. So I think I don't know, does that apply to Acher? He is no longer in that position of power, but he still has that he did have that credibility. So how do we weigh his heresy? Or a much more Acher may not be a real person, right? A lot of the rabbis are probably real, but he feels kind of archetypal. But Shabbatai Tzvi, right? Definitely a real person. What? You lost. We can still hear you.
Oh yeah? I can't see anybody.
Shabbatai Tzvi in the 16th century, 15th century was a leader of a Jewish community in the Ottoman Empire, I guess in Turkey or somewhere in that part of the world. And his followers believed he was the Messiah. And then he converted to Islam under, the caliphate said, convert or be put to death. And he chose to convert, which is in general, Judaism understands forced conversion and does not encourage people to choose death. But imagine you think someone is the Messiah and then he just bails out on you and converts to another religion. That's pretty harsh. So yeah, how do you weigh that? Is a question, one of the many on this topic.
I think socially we hold rabbis, police officers, lawyers, doctors to a different standard than the average person. And but if somebody has not, but I think by the same token, what the Talmud is trying to say is knowledge, learning is so important that we should not discard all sources just because they might not be of the highest integrity. Well, not maybe integrity, but because they somehow might have been marred by some event or something. my
Yeah.
thought.
I think that is a good thought. Okay, I'm gonna read this last story and then we will continue the conversation next week. Next week, because of other things going on at the synagogue, the class will start at 11 instead of 1. Just so you all know. Okay, so the last story. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said, in the West, that is, in Eretz Yisrael, they say, Rabbi Meir ate a half-ripe date and threw the peel away. Rava taught, what is the meaning of that which is written? I went down into the garden of nuts to look at the green plants of the valley. That's a quote from Song of Songs. Why are Torah scholars compared to nuts? To tell you, just as this nut, despite being soiled with mud and excrement, its contents is not made repulsive, so too a Torah scholar, though he has sinned, his Torah is not made repulsive. Sorry. The Gemara relates, Rabbah bar Shila found Elijah the prophet who had appeared to him. He said to Elijah, what is the Holy One, blessed be he, doing? Elijah said, he is stating laws transmitted by all of the sages, but in the name of Rabbi Meir, God will not speak. Rabbah bar Shila asked why, and Elijah replied, because he learned tradition from the mouth of Acher. He said to him, why should he be judged unfavorably for that? Rabbi Meir found a pomegranate and ate its contents while throwing away its peel. Elijah conceded this point. He said to him, now God is saying, my son Meir says, when a person suffers, how does the divine presence express itself? Woe is me from my head, woe is me from my arm. If the Holy One, blessed be he, suffers to such an extent over the blood of the wicked, how much more so does he suffer over the blood of the righteous? So, the ending there is similar to the one with Rabbi Yehuda.
With the bench
the
that
bench,
catches
yeah.
fire.
But I like the point also about the pomegranates and the nuts that you can glean what's inside and discard the part that's yucky. And that there's still something to that. Yeah. All right. So there are a lot of directions we could go in this about this for next week. Does anybody have like final questions or suggestions of where, like which direction to go in first?
I want to know, you titled this series having to do with money and power.
Yeah.
Where did the money aspect come in? Or is
Yeah.
it that come in?
Well, so the question is, when leaders go bad, where do we draw the line? So money can also be, I guess, figurative in this sense, like if, like, power, if somebody in a position of power behaves inappropriately in some way, is it different than when someone without power behaves poorly? So my thoughts for the other sessions would be to look at how money affects these things particularly, and like money in campaigns, things like that specifically.
What
how
about
money
ignorance?
Ignorance? Well, what do you mean?
What if ignorance has these negative effects, but it wasn't intentional that it be negative? The person didn't really, who's making the decision or whatever, didn't really understand what was going on.
Right. Okay, so then so the other question is, people in positions of power that they're maybe not really equipped for.
Right.
And then the other thing,
Why do we hold people in power to a higher standard?
right?
But you might remove them from office, but you wouldn't put them in jail if they didn't understand. I don't know.
Right, but that's still a higher standard, right? Because if someone
Yeah.
in a position of power says an anti-Semitic thing, for example, because they just didn't realize that they were using like something with old tropes about globalists and money, you know, something that's like a dog whistle that they
Unless
don't.
unless you believe that the person's just faking the ignorance, that's another story
Well,
too.
that's another, yes. But let's assume, just for the sake of this, right, that they don't know, but they said it and it's still harmful. We would remove them from power.
They need to say something too to remedy that.
Yes, to remedy it. Right, there needs to be a public apology. If someone in the break room at Walmart says it, it might make any Jewish employees at Walmart not want to talk to that person, but they wouldn't necessarily need to be fired because who's hearing it? What platform does that person have? Right?
Well,
So it's a different scale. So that's the question, right? Is how does power change the responsibility?
teachers have
How
power.
does money affect power? And then this less sound, it doesn't fit with the title as well of money and power, but it fits with these stories from the Talmud that have been brought. The other sort of subtopic being, how do we separate the art from the artist? So someone like J.K. Rowling, who has spewed hateful things online, but her work is, I mean, like Harry Potter's all about like anti-bigotry, right? Like they're fighting the big bad blood purist, right? So how do you separate those things and still learn, right? Or like, I don't know, people still listen to Wagner. Like how do you enjoy art from someone that you know was a bad person? Or not necessarily a bad person, that's a big qualifier that
Yeah.
doesn't whatever, but like someone whose values you don't agree with.
Or what about someone who is, like, for example, well, Michael Jackson. He was beaten to a pulp as a kid if he had one mistake. And that developmentally can affect the development of the brain. And so how do you hold him accountable for doing things to other children and at the same time recognizing that there's an impediment there too?
Right.
There's laws about that.
There are laws about that.
Yeah. But
okay. So we will continue on one of these tracks, one of these 3 subtopics next week. And I will put stuff on the website to both the text from today and then something that gives you an idea of which subtopic when I decide for next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.